So last time we basically got into drawing the object right at a 45 degree angle. We learned that we could actually just take lines themselves, even though we found out that they were called curves, right? Even though they're definitely lines and not curved. But in the digital realm, that everything is essentially called a curve when it's a line element, right? Funny enough. But that being the case, we also learned that I don't really have to do this particular exercise to scale. So one of the first things we did was make our title block and things like this. However, one of the mistakes that I made was, well, I accidentally put it on this side of the paper, not knowing that, oh yeah, I forgot, I gotta calculate some shade and shadow. And I may wanna do it in the same style or way that I did it drafting wise, right? So in my case, I'm not just gonna get rid of it and start over. I can just copy the whole thing, because the digital realm copies stuff well. In fact, it does it great. It does it in seconds, and it makes a perfect carbon copy of that, right, to say the very least. However, here I might need to do a couple of things, like, I don't know, take my title block and mirror it. Maybe delete the original, just because I don't need it anymore. But I wanted maybe my title block stuff literally on the other side. And I'm able to calculate my shade and shadow a little bit better and have some room for that to happen, right? Bless you. But I didn't have to start over completely. So again, one thing I would definitely write down in my sketchbook is that when in doubt, make a copy of something, right? That way I don't sit there and trim it, mess it up, spatialize it, and accidentally have to start over. Wow, good thing I made a copy. Of course, Isaiah knows this well after taking my computer graphics class, just how damning moving stuff and Boolean differencing things and modeling stuff can be in terms of your time and learning a program and things like this. So again, when in doubt, make a copy. However, for today, I do want to calculate some of the shade and shadow, and I do want to show you a little bit more about what we can do in terms of, well, how to make this a lot easier for us in Illustrator, right? Don't get me wrong, I love Illustrator, and it's really good at making line weights. You know what it's really not good at? Selecting individual lines, especially when you have thousands of them, possibly even in the same area. Selecting a line in Illustrator can be like pulling teeth and cause hours and hours of time. So another thing that I would write down today is that all drawing is done in Rhino. Simple as that, right? And you'll see why when we get into Illustrator again today. So just to get into it a lot quicker, let's go over at least calculating the shade and shadow. And in my case, I'm going to go ahead and make myself some lines, such as, I don't know, construction lines. After all, we went over the point last time that digital drawing is really cool and all, but it definitely has this finalized way of being looked at, right? When somebody sees a digital drawing, they literally assume that it's final, done, finished. When that's not always necessarily the case in architecture, right? Sometimes we're just making a diagram of how something should be, right? And more or less, we even want our clients or our studio professors to more or less imagine what we're doing, not necessarily think that it's in stone, such as a study model. And in many instances, this could be considered a study model, but what do we do to make it look a little bit more human? Well, one of the things that you could do is actually add some errors to it. So for instance, very often what I would like to do, I literally add some errors to it, especially at the end where I'd have some lines that cross over or, you know, step out a little bit. Another way that I could do that is simply extend the lines. Now, of course, it needs somewhere to go, so I'll choose there. And you can take, oh, that's a little bit too much, right? A little bit too much of an error. But for instance, I can extend some lines in order to make some, you know, some happy little mistakes, right? That might be still too big, right? And things like that. And that one's definitely way too big. But again, I do want to imply the construction line-ness of maybe what I'm doing. However, you'll find that you actually have to do it the opposite way sometimes, right? Or just really start off as a construction line drawing. So for instance, let's say I wanted to add some construction lines in white. And I could definitely do so. Those are going to be very light lines that really more or less make it appear like I know what I'm doing, right? So for instance, here and there, I'm going to extend some lines. going to ask me which one of those lines. Well, I'm going to choose the one that is the color of the layer that I want. So in my case, that one. And I can more or less make some construction lines. To be fair, I can really put them anywhere, because I'm going to put them really lightly anyway, right? So don't get me wrong, I like some of that stuff, again, to make it a little bit more sketchy. And already right now, it looks a little bit more undone, doesn't it? Even though it is a digital drawing, there seems to be this kind of sketchiness to it, right? Or at least sort of a human error to it, right? I'll extend that one a little bit more, and so on and so forth. But again, just like, the differences is actually what make it so interesting. So don't get me wrong, you know, it already is implied that there's this kind of perfection to it, right? But again, seeing that kind of sketchiness, and especially once we put some line weight to it, there'll be no question. However, for the sake of this, we went over a little bit like line weight 1, line weight 2, maybe line weight 3, line weight, etc. Of course, I was being a little bit funny there. But in my case, I do want to keep track of each of the differences that I know that I would draft anyway, right? How many of you guys kind of already know that? Maybe not at the very beginning of your very first drawing, but by one of your final drawings, you sometimes know that, oh, I'm going to do this just in construction lines, then go back in pen. So that would be two different layers, the construction line layer and the pen layer, if that helps, right? So name a layer pen, right? If that is, of course, helpful for you. But in our case, let's go ahead and calculate the shade and shadow. And just to kind of review it a little bit, we will need our bottom points, right? Of course, in my case, I'm going to use construction lines because I want to show them anyway, right? So I'm going to use all of this as my layer of construction lines. So in my case, I'm just going to rotate. Make sure I go down negative 60 degrees, or yeah, negative 60 degrees. Awesome. That will be my intersection of that piece. Now let's go ahead and get this face, if you will. And this is what I meant last time by, wow, once you've got one line, you can quite literally copy it over and over again. Thankfully, to my O snap over here, and just in case you don't have it over here, you'll notice it's at the bottom of Windows, right? You'll see these little check boxes. It's just in two different spots in terms of Windows and Macintosh. But you will need the O snap button. If that's not on, you'll notice that O snap just doesn't work at all. In fact, you'll kind of sit there and be like, is it connecting to that spot? And you'll never really know. You'll think it will because it visually looks that way, but once upon zooming in, you'll be like, oh God, it starts over here and not the spot that I want it to. So again, make sure that O snap is on, and you'll see that it immediately, and now my text boxes show up. Hopefully I'm screen recording. Yes, I am screen recording, but remember last time those little text boxes didn't show up? Anyway, but let's go ahead and take those pieces, because why draw that over and over again when I can just copy it? I'm going to need a top point for that piece. I'm going to need a top point for that piece. I'm going to need a top point for that piece. And again, you'll see that these actually line up. In my case, I'm going to turn everything off to make that a little easier for you guys to see. I just have endpoints right now enacted. So it's going to find a endpoint and hit it. It's going to find a endpoint. However, I think you'll notice with these, they don't exactly go all the way down, or they're not going to come to a point. So let's do one face at a time, right? There's my bottom point that I take out horizontally. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that one as well. Well, that's not the bottom point. That is. Oh, but it's not clicking anywhere. Maybe if I had intersection, and I see the intersection between, intersection between two lines. How wonderful is that? Does anybody else maybe wish this was like a real thing in real life while you're drafting, that it could like snap to things? Yeah, me too. That's why I've started developing with Apple, actually a smart board, so essentially Apple Paper. I'm probably not supposed to talk about it or record it, but actually they're suing people for that right now. Anyway, big story in Apple. But let's get the bottom piece, but it one day might be a reality is what I'm trying to tell you, right? In our case, we do have these intersection points, and I'll go ahead and delete this because, well, some of my construction lines might actually confuse you. So I'm going to go ahead and put them in later. Or, you know, if I didn't want to necessarily delete all that, I could just hide it and press enter. If I wanted it to come back, I type in show and it would literally come back. But in my case, it is kind of in the way, at least in terms of this tutorial. So, oh, there's that intersection. There's that line. there's the intersection, and there we go, right? So in this case, I'm going to use a polyline. After all, it is just construction line. I don't really need an edge to my shadow. So in my case, I want to get the whole thing. Click, click. Good thing that intersection button is on, and look at that. Even Smart Draft is trying to like help me out. Like, oh, did you mean this angle? Yes, thank you, right, for that back line. Even though, yes, as Gavin is bringing up, we should calculate that by hand. In my case, I'm just going to get the rest of the object just in case I want to use that, right, as a solid piece for shade and shadow. I might want to hatch it and give it some lines. It's following the right line. Maybe I want to give it a little bit more density, so I'm going to change its scale to maybe, I don't know, 0.5. Oh, didn't do anything. It's okay. Usually you can double click on a hatch or it won't do anything at all. It's okay. We'll click on the hatch itself and we'll go to properties, and just right there, it's the same box that we were met with. In our case, I just want to change the density of the object. So in my case, let's try 0.5 again. There we go. That way we can get a few more lines in there. Even so, I could probably get some more lines in there. Let's go with 0.33. That's percentage, by the way. And that's looking pretty sweet, right? My gosh, I saved myself a lot of copying even. Don't get me wrong, I could get a line and I could just like sit there and like copy them and trim them. But let's face it, hatch is a little bit easier. And once I'm done with everything, if I explode it, it actually turns it into a bunch of single lines anyway, which is something I'll need to do before I go into Illustrator. So I don't want to do that necessarily yet. I'll kind of do it all at once, but already, let me tell you, I mean, that's already perfect. It looks great. But again, what makes it look so human is the sketchiness of those construction lines. Now, I know they're kind of deep and they're kind of in the way, especially digitally. But once we get to Illustrator, hopefully you'll see what I mean by making this look a little bit more human. Let's keep going. And let's go ahead and make a new construction line for these top pieces. So in my case, it's not going to help me. It doesn't magically know where 60 degrees is. So I'm just going to draw it as long as possible and then rotate it 60 degrees. So in my case, click, click. In my space, and technically I'm going negative 60 degrees here from that 0 point. Looking pretty sweet. And go ahead and get my bottom line. In this case, since I'm going for the bottom surface here, I'm going to hold shift, that way it stays straight, and click. There's my intersection of points. And to be fair, if something's really getting out of the way for you, you can always trim it too, right? If that's somewhat helpful. I notice students, like, they do like to trim some things. Let's go ahead and get this wild piece today. I know a lot of us struggled with that a little bit. So let's go ahead and copy. And let's get all of our top points. In our case, that's not going to really cast a shadow, right? I mean, it will there, right on that face. But let's start from the top. Obviously, we can't have anything go out into nowhere, but we do need to calculate for it so that we can get that intersection point. But we'll get all of our top pieces. And we've already got that one. Sweet. Let's get the bottom ones. So again, I'm just going to take the one I already have. I'm going to stretch it a little bit, right? Give it a little human area there. And let's go ahead and get our bottom point. That's not our bottom point, but that is. And see how it clicks right into it? I can't express enough that O-Snap and Smart Track, if it's not doing that kind of cool stuff to where you can kind of align and then kind of take it out, it's because Smart Track isn't on, and you definitely want that. Let's get our bottom point for this one. That one might be a little harder to find, right? Oh, it's going to find it beautifully, isn't it? Nope, right? Because there's no angle from there to there telling us that. However, I could take this one. I mean, why work harder when I can just work a little smarter, right? And there's my bottom point for that piece. So again, I'll take that copy because it copies so well and just take it, right? There's that intersection that turns out I'm not going to see anyway unless it's actually projected on this plane. Okay, well, let's go ahead and delete some unnecessary things, right? After all, I won't even see that. I need to find really this level, right? So what can I do? What can I do? I can hide that to make that a little easier for myself. And really extend this line to find out where it exists, right? Or I could just move up an inch from where I am, so I can copy. And there's my inch up, right? Even better, there's my bottom point that I need. And it doesn't look like it's going to find the angle for us. That's okay. Obviously, I'll just copy one where I already do have the angle, and there's the bottom point that I need to calculate that one. Some of you guys are like, oh, that's how I was supposed to do it, right? But there's the bottom point of that one, right? Just like the bottom of that point would be there if I was trying to project it onto that plane. So let's keep going. We got our bottom piece. Let's go ahead and get this little nib right there, right? Because that's got to go somewhere. After all, I don't need to do all that over again. I could just copy it and copy it from a similar point. So for here, I'm going to copy it there, right? There's that bottom box that I need, right? More or less. I know it starts to get confusing, especially when I do stuff like this. So I'll go ahead and trim them for us. That way it's a little easier to look at. Keep in mind that's really beneath this box. I'll kind of trim it the way that it should look in your head, right? It's kind of going underneath there. But let's calculate our shade and shadow. First things first, we notice that, well, from back here, that shadow's never going to hit anything. So we don't even need that one besides the shadow that it'll cast here. So in my case, trim. Boop. I no longer need that. This will, of course, be in shade. This will actually also be in shadow or shade. And then this is the opposite side of there. So keep in mind that the way that we're looking at things is going to start to have that illusion, if you will, right? Just like you would in, if you were drawing it regularly, right? Well, let's go ahead and calculate and draw our lines. There's the bottom point we need. Perfect. And it looks like it is going to hit. Oh, wait. Is it? Is it going to hit? Oh, I don't have the right point. Let's move it. We'll type in move. Of course, it's like this one or this one, this one or this one. Obviously, the little bit longer one. Let's go ahead and move. So we can type in move, enter. And of course, move it to that point. Now in my case, wait, it is in the right spot. We're just not going to hit it, right? At least at this angle. It's just not going to cast a shadow there at all. Let's go ahead and double check and make sure on this one. Oh, there's that point I need. And what do you know? It's not going to hit that one either. So again, this plane, it just won't get anything. That's okay. I don't have to put. However, I'm still going to leave some of my work there. Such as like something like that. Right? I mean, why not? It's going to be so light anyway that, you know, it either kind of helps, and you could always delete something later, I guess, too. In our case, that one's kind of confusing, so I'll get rid of that one. But let's complete at least this portion. So again, I'll hit align and go to that point. In my case, is that right? It should follow the right angle. I don't know, something seems off about that, but looks okay. However, it's going to chop off right here. So TRIM for trim. And we'll cut that right off. You don't need everything though, right?
Might have been because you forgot that one line from the bottom point.
Say what now?
You were like wondering why I was off, but you forgot to bring that bottom point out.
Oh, I thought it was, but...
Yeah, that one out, yeah.
Oh, I did. That was kind of the original one. It's right there.
Oh, okay.
Boop, 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 boop. It just kind of looked like it was off, but I think it actually is pretty close. But yeah, let's trim that off because we can't have shadow just floating in the air. And after all, I may need to really get that back piece, right? I mean, it might show up a little bit now that I look at it. So let's draw it. There's that piece. We'll go real long on that one, rotate. And -60, enter. I don't know, will we see it? Let's find out. Ah, that's not the bottom point, right? So let's take our inch measurement because, well, I already have one right here, and take it down. There's that point I need. Let's take it all the way up. Ah, there's the intersection of that one. TRIM, trim. Ah, okay, okay. So not quite. This one goes up. Oh, I forgot this one and how it goes back, right? So let's take that piece, copy. The top of that one, there's actually a top there. When those intersect, right? There's actually a top one there, even though we'll never see it. And there's a top one back there. Of course, causing that to happen. So my full polyline is really from back here. Well, that's not the same spot. I gotta use the right math here. Oh wait, is it? Let's find out. Copy. Again, why do that all over again? It was the same spot, I knew it. Anyway. Take it out. Nice. So we will get a little bit of the back shadow right from that piece. However, I don't need all those things. I could keep them if I really wanted to show my construction lines. But for right now, I'm just gonna go ahead and trim. In my case, and get rid of anything that I put there just for the sake of knowing where stuff is. Right, stuff like that. And we'll trim it up. In our case, we have this piece. Oh, you know, we might get a little bit of back piece too. We'll keep it like that for now. Polyline. Okay, boop, boop. Then it'll go down. In my case, it'll actually line up with this guy right here. And, well, you won't see it anyway. But we'll get a little bit of the edge there. So, trim. Say the very least. And again, some of this stuff might just really get in y'all's way. But it'll become a little bit better once we get to our other program. So in my case, I'm going to go ahead and show everything. Not sure what this... Oh, get out of here. But here's basically our take two. Let's get the rest of the shadow though. So in my case, let's trim off some of the things we don't need. These were really just for calculation. Not a huge deal. Kind of like the sketchiness there. But I do want to get the whole piece, and to be fair, it's not a very big piece. It's like right there. So let's go ahead and polyline it. Boop. Basically getting the outline of it. And complete. So we should have a whole piece there. Sweet. I'm gonna go ahead and hatch it. Awesome. And if I remember my settings from last time, I did 0.33. Awesome. Should be about the same spacing, more or less. Not too shabby there. And lastly, we have this piece down here, so let's get that. Again, I like to polyline it because, again, I never know when I kind of need that polyline sometimes. Sometimes I don't. And I just like to kind of have it because I can always delete it if I don't need it. But that's...
What does that do?
Basically, it makes a little border. You see that? And it makes it a little easier to hatch it as well. Can easily hatch that piece, right? And those are two separate pieces. Awesome. That's looking pretty sweet. Although I can move it a little bit if it's just kind of looking a little weird. Or we could change the scale a little bit. Maybe point, I don't know, 28. That way the lines don't necessarily match up there. You can make them not match up on purpose. That way it gives it a little bit more of a, you know, spread there. But that's looking pretty sweet. Of course, that should be in shade. I don't know. I think I'm doing all shades like orange now. So don't get me wrong. To answer Gavin's question, do I need to make that polyline there? Not necessarily. So, I mean, don't get me wrong. I can highlight everything. and I can go into a boundary mode. So if I type in hatch, it's going to go, hey, do you mean everything? And you're going to be like, no, 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 no. Boundary mode. And then it's going to go, okay, well, where do you want to click to fill that in? And in Gavin's case, he would click there, right? Once you do that, once you press enter, then you have the exact same things. But I didn't have to make a polyline in order to do that. I like to make the polyline just because, I don't know, I might use it. But again, if I don't, it's easier to take it away than to try to go back to Rhino, draw it again, and so on and so forth. But it's a really good question. In our case, I need to switch the angle to match this line, which is -60. So in my case, I'll go back to rotation, -60. Sweet. And we got those lines. So don't get me wrong, we have to use a little bit of math here, right? But it's more or less math that you were already doing in the first place. But more or less, that's looking pretty good. I could check some things, maybe make some errors here, things like that. Sketchiness is looking pretty nice, actually. You got our top piece. Kind of want to get some more, some construction lines in there. And this is also where I would dial in my layers as well. So don't get me wrong, we can always take something and relayer it. So if we go to our layers, I know I explained this a little bit last time, but let's say, I don't know, new layer, and you actually want a new shade or something. You just messed it up for some reason, or you just wanted a new layer, right? So in my case, I'm going to switch it to red so that we can notice the difference that it makes. We'll right click on the layer and change that object layer. Once we do that, it turns red because it's matching the layer that it came from. However, just to recap and cover it again, right? A couple things that we introduced was obviously some shade and shadow, calculating those things out and seeing what we do with them. Keep in mind, like for students that have taken graphics with me or computer graphics with me, it's still a flat dimensional thing. It's not Make 2D. It's not something that we were normally taught in this way. It really is drafting, except just commands now, right? And to be fair, I think most of our students start to realize, wow, you know, I like drafting, but I get really messy, the paper's really dirty, or the paper's really expensive, I mess up all the time, I have to sharpen my pencils all the time, those leads cost a lot of money. There's a lot of expense that comes with those things. So don't get me wrong, we like to use them and we like to do them, teach them, but to be fair, the rest of the world, especially in architecture, is now doing this by D1, right? So it makes sense to at least acknowledge it and show you guys what everybody else is doing in graphics too. But let's say I was finished, I was done drawing, you know, it looked fantastic. I don't know, maybe I got every single line weight just right. I mean, don't get me wrong, I still didn't do that for this part. So let's actually switch that up a little bit. Let's take this piece, I don't know, that piece. Obviously, you're gonna be a little bit more methodical about it, right? In terms of course, you know which lines need line weight and which ones don't. But in my case, for the sake of tutorial, I'm just going to pick a few ones that I already have kind of open and switch their line weights, such as line weight, etc., and change object layer. Now it should change black pretty immediately, but that's looking pretty good in terms of where I want to be in turning it into an Illustrator drawing. However, you'll notice some stuff comes off the page, and we did set this to be our 11 by 17. So, I mean, don't get me wrong, if you're kind of OCD like I am, some people will be like, well, let's get rid of the lines there, and at least more or less see what it's going to look like on the page. And I will say, compared to this one, that one looks a little finished and way too digital, whereas this one looks a little more sketchy, a little more still being figured out, if you will, right? But let's go ahead and take the whole thing, and we'll go to File, Export Selected. When we go to that, we have a number to choose from, but in our case, we can either choose an AI or a DWG. In my case today, I'll choose an AI and just do test exercise 5. And we'll put it on the desktop for today, AI file, pretty good. To be fair, we could do either of these things. Well, I know we made it 1:1, so I'm definitely not going to make 1 inch equal 1/4 of an inch. I'd make 1 inch equal 1 inch, right? So not a big deal. Another thing I could do is, well, I could just do a snapshot of the current view, and that's going to maintain my scale anyway, right? So either of those are going to work today. Export. and minimize. In our case, we'll pull up Illustrator and we'll go ahead and open that file just like we did last time, right? Just to go over some of the interface again. But I do want to go over some more specific tools that we could use in order to, again, make this more believable that it was done by a human and not an AI or a robot. Funny enough, you show somebody a piece of artwork and you're like, I made this piece of artwork. And they're like, wow, that's amazing. And then you say, I used AI, and then suddenly it's not amazing anymore. It's the weirdest thing to me. However, if I'm doing the calculations for a really hard truss system in a building, right, or a bridge, and I say I checked it with AI, suddenly it becomes more valuable because now it was checked by something that was all perfect and necessary. So it's kind of weird what society is doing with AI right now. If it's applied to art, if it's applied to engineering or construction or verifying something, then suddenly it's put on a pedestal. So I don't know, I would look out for those kinds of things. Don't get me wrong, I think art, the reason is because art is human, right? Mistakes are human, and maybe that's why. But let's go ahead and open up that test exercise number 5. In our case, it's like, hey, your font is out of date, and that's okay. You can press update if you want. But you should more or less have all of the layers that you began with. And in my case, since mine was way over at the bottom, it's going to be kind of slightly towards the bottom. Not a big deal. Not sure why my layers is that big today, but okay. We'll take all of those pieces, and more or less all we have to do is put it in the right spot. So we should already have 11 by 17. If you don't, we can go to File, Document Setup, and Edit Artboards. Once we do that, you'll see that at the very top we have an 11 by 17, and I can verify that yes, I do in fact have 11 by 17. So mine just probably needs to be positioned a little bit more. Sweet. But from here, just in case you missed it last time, I'm going to go ahead and do it again. Just be aware that I'm not trying to select anything in Illustrator. In fact, I'm trying to avoid it at all costs because you'll notice trying to select something, you have no idea what you selected. It puts a bounding box over the entire diagonal of a line, which is really annoying because, well, I can select something in that line and I still have no idea if I've selected it or not. So again, Illustrator is not the best tool for drawing, especially orthogonally in architecture. However, we can turn everything off at first, and we can start with our title block like we did last time, right? We can double click on the layer itself, and of course change not only the line weight, but its fill properties as well. So for instance, I can control the length, or sorry, not the length, but the width, or the thickness, I should say, the line weight itself. And I can lock these layers to dial them in. Obviously, we don't want any orange lines, so I'm going to go ahead and change those to... And what's really nice is you can do it in live time. Again, never use perfect black. We really want to go for that gradient look, that graphite on paper, if you will. And in my case, I never even go close to 1-point font. I don't know if I mentioned this last time, but the smallest line weight that you can achieve on a printer is 0.125 points. So that's definitely the smallest. I'll probably use that one for my construction lines. In my case, these are going to be the thick and nice bold lines that I'm going to go for, I don't know, 0.85. It's pretty sweet. And I'll go for a little bit of darkness there. Not too shabby. We'll go ahead and lock it. That way, again, I don't mess any of those up. Not sure what I'm activating here. It could be white. It could have absolutely nothing on it. So let's keep going. Oh, there's the rest of the pieces I needed. Those are actually receding a little bit, so I could technically make them a little bit lighter. And what's really nice is it does give us a preview while we do that. However, it previews at the amount of space I need, so 0.55. A little too much, right? Again, I'm not going to sit there and select every line. I'm just going to select the invisible box and change it. Sweet. Already looking pretty realistic, right, in terms of a human made it. Definitely doesn't quite look computerish. Now again, none of us are going to zoom in this much to our drawings, but I do believe that the subconscious mind actually does pick up these subtle differences. In fact, your mind is making billions of calculations as we speak, which is pretty cool. Next layer. Oh, my construction lines. Remember I made those white, so I really can't see them. In my case, I'll select all my construction lines. I'll go ahead and lock the other layers. That way, well, I don't accidentally take them. And I'll go ahead and make them really the smallest line type, which is 0.125. Enter. And we'll go ahead and change the color to obviously not white. In my case, maybe a very fine, yeah, look at that. So extremely fine there. In fact, even the computer's having a hard time even showing it. Might be a little too much. Don't get me wrong, that is the thinnest. Maybe we go a little bit bigger there. Let's get them all. Maybe a little bit more darkness there, why not? It's kind of funny, you'll notice that a really thick line with a light color can look just about the same as a really thin line with a really dark color. You see what I'm saying there? So there is a happy medium, and to be fair, there are certain intersection points where two lines look the same, even though they're quite literally not. Right? So I mean, don't get me wrong, there's a lot you can do with this system in terms of variability. So keep that in mind. But those are looking pretty good, right? I can't even see them actually until I zoom in a little bit. That's kind of scary. I do want them a little bit darker than that. However, you'll notice like on the screen that Carlos is on, or like Anna's on, those $4,000 screens, the color you see there in Illustrator is the color of print. So I mean, that's kind of the gift of a true color screen. Whereas in, unfortunately, most other cases, they're not even close to be, not even the Mac, which arguably is probably one of the better screens, but still not true color like, say, the Wacom screens that are actually color calibrated to match Adobe and all the printers. Anyway, but that's looking pretty good, and you'll see even when I move, it kind of previews as the previous piece that it was, but that's okay. It's starting to look like a pretty nice line drawing. We'll go ahead and lock that one into place and go with our last shade and shadow, right? Oh, however, you'll notice that I forgot to blow up, right? Remember those lines that I had for the hatch? That's okay. It's okay. I'll show you what we can do in order to get those back, which is good. I didn't mean to do that, but you may very well run into the same mistake. So let's go ahead and change these to not red, but something a little more palatable, kind of like an off, and maybe even give it a little bit of transparency to really give it that lightness, right? That would be more comparable to an analog drawing. But that alone right there is starting to look pretty decent. Not only is it, have some human error to it, but it's also starting to look a little computer generated. It does have this perfection to it. However, I did miss some lines, so let's go ahead and get those lines. After all, we did all the work on them, so let's take that piece, that piece, that piece, all basically the pieces that I missed, and I'll go ahead and take my bounding box as well because, well, I gotta align it to something, right? So we'll take those. In my case, I'm going to make a copy of them. Put them over here. And I'm going to explode them. The reason I do that is because when you explode something, it turns it into its simplest form. And, well, the simplest form of this hatch is a bunch of tiny little lines. But that's looking pretty good. I'm going to...
You would have done, like, for the whole piece when you were about to copy it? Explode it like that? Because that's what you forgot to do.
Yeah, that's what I forgot to do. Yeah.
So you would just do that?
I would have still made a copy and then exploded it.
Okay.
Because, again, what's kind of hard about an explosion is you can't unexplode something unless you just edit undo. So very often I make a copy, that way, just in case I mess up on what I'm about to do, I got a copy of it. I can't really mess up, right? So there's an infinite possibility, there's an infinite copying possibility there, right? But I do have a lot of small lines, and again, I kind of want to keep them in one spot so I don't lose them, right? I mean, quite frankly, I think it'll actually tell you I have 260 curves added to my selection. And yeah, I want to make sure I get all 260 of them. So in my case, File, Export Selected. Probably should change it to the not color white, but let's see what happens. Export Selected, and we'll call it Exercise 5 Shadow, or Shades. In this case, Shadows. Put on our desktop, Illustrator file, and it'll keep the previous settings that I had previously. From there, I just need to actually insert them here, or I could just File Open, take this shot. Now, to be fair, it'll be off in the middle of nowhere. We'll take a copy of that, so Command C or Control C if you're on Windows, and paste them. Nice. Now I just have to align it with some of my tools. And to be fair, more or less, that's not too shabby. I kind of want it to be a little off. But before I unclick, I want to realize, ooh, I put it on the same layer as this one. I may actually want to make a new layer, call it Shade and Shadow or Shadows. Something that maybe differentiates a little bit. And basically drag it on there. You see what I did there? I used the invisible box. It's very powerful. Isaiah knows, right? Especially when selecting something. But I may realize, well, you know, these outside boxes, oh man, I know outlines of shadows don't actually exist. So let's go ahead and get my actual shadows first. So maybe change that to some sort of line. Sweet. Instead of 1 point, we'll do, I don't know, 0.2. As you can see. Oh, it got the lines, but it's hiding them. What's going on there? Something I can't see. And again, selecting something can be quite difficult. And as you can see, it's there, but it's hidden by something. It's like something's on top of it, right?
The layers or something?
Exactly. Thank you, Gavin. I was hoping somebody would notice that. Yes, we could take our shadows layer and basically put it at the top. And of course it's not going to show up if it's not at the top. So again, I'm going to take every single one, 0.125. And to be fair, I could still take everything and dial it in with my arrows. So even if it was just slightly off, again, use your arrows to, of course, perform. However, I've got this piece here that, don't get me wrong, I could take each one and sit there and kind of delete each one. It's going to take a little while, especially when things are locked into place. So I can turn all those off. Yeah, it looks like there was just nothing in that layer. That's okay. And don't get me wrong, when I was a student, I would have just gone into each one of these. I would have just taken, you know, the full box, right? And deleted it. However, you'll notice I'll delete stuff and nothing really happens, right, to say the least. Construction lines, I'll probably put on the top too, because those look a little bit nicer. Ah, I think I found the problem. This line is causing some things in the way, right? So of course, sometimes you have to put things at the top in order to see what's going on there. And in my case, I could just delete that box. But what it's actually doing is, well, it's showing that there's stuff in there, right? So if I flip it, I can actually change it to nothing. I could take this one and switch it to nothing as well, which is what this little white box with a slash through it. So I've basically just made it an invisible object. But as you can see, it starts to look a little bit more like the graphic standards that we would have for shade and shadow, right? Again, there's that piece. And I'm going to change that to nothing and nothing. Not too shabby, huh? And if I didn't talk so much, I would be done way quicker. Although I think I'm missing still a piece. Looks like I still got that piece. That's okay. We'll just make that one invisible.
So you just kept making them invisible until you could see all the line in?
The polyline ones that I did, right? So keep in mind, a closed line can come in. You can do anything to a closed line in Illustrator. You can close it. You can fill it in with something. You can turn it into a hatch from Illustrator. I'm not going to necessarily go over that today. But yeah, you can also use the hatch itself, explode, and use that as separate lines. So really, I'm throwing a lot of options at you guys here, right? To be fair, some people have just different preferences, right? And to be fair, different drawings have different preferences too. So, but let's change the color of those. I don't know, I kind of want a little bit of darkness there. Looks like you got that one too. Get out of here. You could also just delete them if they're really in the way. There we go. But let's say I was completely done and I do want to print. So just in case, for Wednesday, essentially you'll have 3 of these, by the way. You could do them all on separate files, or you could create 3 artboards as I was expressing last time. Most of us know how to print, but just in case you've never gone through the process, we'll go to File, Print. We'll print it as essentially a PDF, right? So in our case, what you might want to do on your computer first is File, Save As, and then make sure that you save it as a PDF. In our case, it's going to ask, do you want to save it to the cloud or the computer? I'm going to save it to the computer and put it somewhere I can find it, such as the desktop, and make sure that instead of an AI file, that it's a PDF file. From there, once I hit save, it's going to ask me what kind of quality print do I want. Of course, I want a high quality print. However, if I was trying to put it in my portfolio, I might want a smallest file size. Who knows? But for our assignment, we'll definitely want high quality and press save. Once we do, we can then open it in Adobe Acrobat, and we could post it on this week's Miro board. Right, I could take that PDF and quite simply drag it right in. So in my case, I believe that's it right there. Nope, that's the 30 print. Let's go with PDF documents, test. There's my test. Can quite literally drag and drop it in, and if the computer internet is running okay, then yeah, we're good to go. Funny enough, it's also at the right size of 11 by 17 as long as it's a PDF. Or we could double click on it and see how it came out. Of course, when you double click on a PDF on the school computer, it'll open up in Adobe Acrobat. And of course, when you go to File, Print, make sure that you look for this printer, MLC502C GP1. And then you print on GoPrint, or if you know the secret hacks of the printers at San Antonio College, then you're more than welcome to use them and share them and not tell anybody, right? But always double check your work, right? And to be fair, it's actually looking pretty good. It's got a couple of human error in there. I kind of like that, right? It's not like you can really tell, can you? Nobody ever looks at a drawing that close anyway. To be fair, you could even start to realize, well, how big is this drawing going to be? There's 11 by 17. Well, let's say this was, I know this size is 11, right? Actually get it pretty close. Oh. If you have a trackpad, by the way. If you're trying to do it with a mouse, that might be a little bit more difficult, but man, even with the trackpad, it's kind of. But more or less, we're actually gonna get the actual size of how it'd be printed out. So don't get me wrong, as you can see, it's a little thicker in the preview and things like that, but I think we'll all soon discover that what we see on the screen isn't exactly what you always get when you print it. And that's kind of the nature of the beast of this program and drafting as well. Arguably, there are some advantages to analog drafting, right? So for instance, making those line weights can be sometimes intuitive, easier, dare I say, right? However, in the digital realm, it's much more functional because I can change it, right? I don't necessarily have to start the drawing over and over again. So again, there's still a battle being waged. And to be fair, it's really only San Antonio College and honestly 2 other colleges in the entire nation that still teach analog. But we're one of them, right? And it's 3 of the strongest programs in the nation, right? Constantly always winning. I don't know about you guys, but I'm tired of winning. No, I'm just kidding. But we do pretty well at San Antonio College, and in fact 10 years ago was voted the #1 community college architecture program in the entire nation. And this was a huge reason why, because we were still teaching analog and we had some really good digital draftsmen as well. But that being the case, just wanted to make sure that I covered part 2 a little bit more clearly. That way when you're doing yours, it can make a little bit more sense. Another thing I can't express enough, guys, is work together on this one. Please don't just copy and paste, right? It would be very easy to technically do, right? However, there's always the slip-ups, and I always find them anyway, right? And I just give both of those people a 0, so it usually sucks. So help each other, and just know that copying each other doesn't necessarily mean helping, right? You're not really helping that person who didn't do it. right? So the person who lets you copy is kind of just as arguably as bad as the one that is copying, if you will. Because again, one of you only knows how to do it. But try your best. I mean, it couldn't get any worse than the analog, right? I mean, to be fair. But any questions about that so far, guys? How to calculate, what to do, 2 dimensions. There are a couple of us, like Isaiah, who has worked with Rhinoceros before. Is there anybody else who has worked with Rhinoceros before? A couple others? Yes. And you were in Amounts, correct? Yeah. So did you guys do any 2-dimensional drawings in Rhino? And you had to like do the command? Yeah. Yeah, so a little bit different, right? Don't get me wrong, you could teach an entire 4 years about just like different things you can do in architecture and the computer, right? Which is why it's so important to take different professors here, guys, because we all kind of teach something more or less a little different, right? Like in my computer graphics, you're going to learn how to 3D print or laser cut or model stuff intensely. Whereas in my graphics too, we're just going to do it by hand or, 2-dimensional drafting, if you will. So anyway, just throwing it out there that there's a reason why we say move around, right? Try different professors. But no questions about the specific assignment, guys? Obviously, please use the rest of the 25 minutes to get started. Keep in mind, get started. You can save and quite literally work on it on your own Rhino 8 at home if you'd like. To be fair, these computers are really nice and really great. They go fast. So use them well. And please, for the love of God, get the liquids away from my computers, even if it has a lid. Carlos?
Close.
It better be. Okay. But that being the case, no questions, guys? All right. I'll upload the video as soon as I get home.